And here we go.
Welcome back, everybody. You are on the Web3 Game
Yeah, one of the co-founders of the WolvesDAO. Thank you so much for sponsoring this year. It means a lot to us to be able to be in a place like this with a view like this. That's thanks to Beamable and some of our other incredible sponsors. My background primarily being in YouTube social media content, so very impressive what you guys have managed to do in a couple of weeks. Wish I could have done it that fast myself personally. And then people mostly know me for doing Twitter Spaces on YouTube, gamified and simplified. In addition, I just became the CMO of the Farcade, which is a hyper casual game builder that aims to be the TikTok of video games, but you use AI to build things in a day.
Awesome. And let's start with WolvesDAO first. What's WolvesDAO? For anybody who doesn't know, if you're in Web3, by the way, and you're watching this and you don't know WolvesDAO, I'm a little concerned about you, but
we'll fix it.
but some of you might be new. Some of you might not be Web3 people too, because I have a lot of, we call them Web 2. Like no one in Web 2 calls himself Web 2, by the way. Yeah. But why don't you share that? Like help people know about it if they don't.
Oh, I see we have the graphic up there too. Awesome. Thanks so much, Oscar. So the WolvesDAO is really unique. We only have 300 members, and a lot of people think that means that we haven't been able to find more than 300 people. But contrary, it's actually that we only accept 300 people at a time. And that means that two things. One, you have to apply to get in, and we have really high bars for the people that we allow in. And two, we do a purge on a monthly basis, where we basically kick out usually around 15 members. It varies depending on sort of the activity in the Discord and who's a good fit and who isn't. We don't kick people out just to kick them out. But if you're not a good fit, then we will remove you. And we've removed about 1,000 people over the last 2.5 years in order to get this core audience or core membership of 300 people. And so what you find whenever you do that is A, everybody is super involved, and B, you have the most diehard Web3 gaming compatriots that are doing really incredible things in the space. They're the builders, the VCs, the KOLs, the influencers, the content creators. And it is amazing what a culture they've created that even I think flows over into real life events. Like you can feel the energy in the house and how it's a little bit different from something like, you go to the Immutable party or something, and it's just a little bit stiff and a little bit rough around the edges, a little bit more transactional. And here I think we've really created something where people feel like they are a part of something bigger, like they're a part of almost like a fraternity that isn't exclusive to guys.
Yeah. Now, the audience for this channel is primarily like people in the game industry. So game developers, investors in games. Talk to them a little bit. Like what does WolvesDAO do for them? Like, I mean, your group, but like, why should they be engaging with you?
That's a great question. A few different answers. I think that there's, for one thing, we try our best to only cultivate people that are willing to have genuine debates about things and not necessarily arguments. We use the phrase like iron sharpens iron. We want people to disagree whenever they come to a panel or whenever they come on the show that I do, or whenever they come to these events. And that doesn't mean that you're mad at each other. It just means that you're really forging your opinions against other strong opinions. And that's basically what the Discord is 24/7 all the time. And because of that, it's a place where people can feel like they can take knowledge and then share it back to their organization, bring back more ideas from their organization to the WolvesDAO, sharpen those ideas. And it's like this really interesting ping pong where they just continue to get stronger and stronger, sort of like the Deconstructor of Fun Discord, if you're familiar with those guys,
sure.
or their Slack, excuse me. And so there's that aspect of it, which is just sort of knowledge sharing, ideas and stuff. But then we have other things that we're trying to do as well, which is like the panels, helping founders get exposure. If you're a really charismatic person with interesting ideas, I want to have you on my shows. I want you to be able to meet other great founders to help you fundraise, to help you achieve your goals in the space. And we also want to invite you to this event. You know, we have some non-sponsored games that we're also featuring at the house just because we like the people, we like the game. We want to, we're trying our best. Thanks, Jon.
Yeah.
And for those reasons, I think it's really important to have a community like this in the space where not everything is transactional, you know?
Okay, so quick station identification, by the way. So you're watching the Web3 Game Developers live stream. This is where we talk to an industry audience primarily. So it's for game developers, designers, investors. Of course, you're more than welcome to slip in here and get some alpha if you want to hear what game developers are talking about and you want to know what's coming down the pipe.
Love that.
I think you're pretty fucking smart if you do that, so good for you. But we like to bring in questions from the audience of designers and developers here so that you can learn how to build better games, fun games, all the stuff that happens in the process of idea to getting it on the screen and making it into a successful business for you.
And I'm sorry, that's foundational to what Beamable aims to do, but can you help me understand in more specificity, like whenever we're talking and working with our members who are also founders and VCs and stuff, when should we send them to you? You know, like what's the thing that they say, we really need this, like, and I'm like, oh, I know the perfect guys.
Yeah, so what Beamable does, so first of all, we've been at this for about 5 years now, but we're a back-end technology. We're software that helps you build all the servers, live services, live ops infrastructure for your game. So what is that? It's the social systems, it's the economic systems of your game, it's content updates, it's the multiplayer components like matchmaking and things like that. So these days, almost all games are live services games. They're online games. Okay. Which means you need game servers, which means you need something in the cloud that helps you do that. And Beamable aspires to be like the Unity or the Unreal Engine of this market. So instead of being the front end, which is what those two companies do, this is a packaged solution to the back end that lets game developers just go back and really just focus on the fun.
Nice.
So that's where we got started. The really cool thing that we're doing over the next few months, though, is we ourselves are a Web3 company. So we're doing a token launch in a few months from now. We haven't announced any dates yet, but if you want to join one of the 500,000 people that have joined our community here in the last couple of weeks, you can go to beamable.network and do that and join the community, and you'll then certainly learn when the token is coming. But you know, that's around what we call a decentralized physical infrastructure network, so DPIN for short. And it's a really cool new trend around community ownership of the hardware and compute resources. And it allows us to essentially compete with Amazon or Google or Azure, who currently dominate the technology in that category, except with community ownership, which means it's decentralized. No one can decide whether you get to be there or not. You don't have to worry if their business model changes because there's always going to be some other data center which will absorb the capacity. You can get a better price. So anyway, that's what we're building, and very excited about it because we have live games already, 86 live games on the platform. And in a nutshell, DPIN is essentially people opting in to offer up their compute in exchange for rewards. Is that accurate? Yeah, that's a good way to think of it. And another way is it's just going back to the roots of crypto. So you look back to Bitcoin. So Bitcoin was, you get Bitcoin, you mine the currency by doing proof of work, which is essentially means you're running cryptographic puzzles on a bunch of computers until a bunch of Bitcoin dumps out on you. Hopefully. Yeah, but you have enough servers, you eventually get some, or you participate in big mining pools, you'll definitely get some. But it takes a lot of energy. And, you know, of course, over time that has changed. Like I used to mine Bitcoin on literally a JavaScript on my blog like 12 years ago or something. And I actually could mine Bitcoin with a JavaScript, but now you need like ridiculous amounts of energy and compute to do that. What DPIN is doing is it allows you to mine a cryptocurrency, but by doing something that a lot more people actually want done. Like there's no inherent reason to do cryptographic puzzles other than if you want to mine a proof of work algorithm like Bitcoin. But game servers is something that people in the real world need, or in other examples would be like project like Helium, where you have Wi-Fi hotspots. You can literally buy a Wi-Fi hotspot and you get paid in a cryptocurrency for operating it. You plug it into your local business. So Beamable is in the business of letting you access game servers, and the game servers come from top tier data centers that have underutilized computers just waiting for people to use them. and it gives them the ability to monetize those servers and offer it back to game companies that need to operate the back end of their games. So yeah, that's what we do. So we help people get to market faster. We save them on cost. We help them build around an open ecosystem that's going to be more sustainable over the long term. Because the biggest challenge in any kind of game development, Web3 or Web2, is just like shots on goal. Like the faster you can get there, the more shots you can take, the more likely your game can be successful. If you get mired up in infrastructure, you're going to be stuck for a while.
And I know you're stoked about Project O that we have here at the house today. We're going to be doing the world first Project O tournament invitational with 16 players that I'm lucky enough to be able to compete in. Very, very excited for that. I'm curious, you said you have 86 games signed. Is there a reason that you're more excited about one than the other? Or is it just like all games are created equal in your eyes because they're using your infrastructure and that's enough?
Well, you can't possibly ask me to select my favorite children.
Yeah.
We're so grateful to everybody who's chosen to build on Beamable, and whether you're a game with 1 user or 1 million MAU, we're just so happy that you joined us on the journey and that we've learned from working with you to build a better platform. I mean, in terms of just pure scale, and the Web3 side, the biggest customer we have today is Mythical Games. So they have games like NFL Rivals. They're building a game based on the FIFA license on Beamable. They're doing a Pudgy Penguins game, again, built on Beamable. So they have the most users, like that's millions of users every month. And when you think about FIFA, it's probably bigger. So that's just scale. Love them. Won't say they're my favorite relative to anyone else because I can't say that, but like they're helping us grow for sure. But also Web 2 is a big part of our market. I want to return to the Web 2 aspect because I think it will be interesting for the Web 3 audience here, that like how we're turning every game into a Web 3 game, even if it's not a Web 3 economy game. But I keep hearing that Web 3 gaming is dead. Like,
I know. What's up with that?
What do you think? Is it dead? Like what happened here?
Dude, this happened like 2 months ago. It was the same thing where all of a sudden, like, I don't know what happens, but one dude tweets it and then like the other dude responds to it, and then 4 more people respond to that response, and then 10 more people respond to the response to the response. And then before you know it, it's like the whole timeline is reacting to what just snowballed from this tiny little comment. And it's just surreal to me how people can somehow change what otherwise was a foundational opinion that you would think if they're building their career around it, they would have, I don't know, deeper conviction on the reasons why they're willing to invest so much time and energy into something than just being like, oh, people launch tokens and I get the first few didn't work out and therefore everything must just be garbage. Like I find that to be a really distasteful opinion personally. So for me, it's going to take so much more to change my mind about Web3 gaming. For me, whenever I say it's inevitable, what I really mean is the technology. I've talked to a lot of people that have founded games like Age of Empires and Words with Friends and Dungeon Siege 2 and stuff.
Wildcard Alliance, which is Paul Bettner, also a Beamable customer.
And right? We also have them here tomorrow, which is really exciting.
Great.
And love those guys. And I've asked them, I've been like, is there a chance, is there a reality in which we go back from blockchain technology? Like we just say, even if it improves exponentially and gets way easier to use, it's just not helpful. So we're just going to never use it. And he was like, there is not a chance that happens because fundamentally it has value. Fundamentally it improves things. The problem is right now, there's just a really big pullback, a really big expense to that, gas fees and infrastructure and legal and regulation, all the stuff that you have to do. But as that gets obfuscated, as we go deeper and deeper into the future, then inevitably we are going to implement it into things because it is useful technology. And so to me, that's what makes it inevitable. We will get there. And for people that lose sight of that, it kind of blows my mind. We're here for a reason. What about you? What do you think?
Well, I think a lot of people have formed an opinion on quote unquote Web3 games. By the way, Web3 games is like the worst fucking brand. Like I wish we never had this term. It shouldn't be called that. It shouldn't be called blockchain games. Like I tried to use things like open economy games.
Okay.
I don't know, probably too technical sounding still. Like, I'm not the branding expert here, but like
Michael from Andromeda was telling me he was trying to convince me to change it to on-chain gaming. What do you think about that one? On-chain gaming.
It's okay. It still sounds a little technical. Like I don't think the player cares about that.
Okay.
Like,
yeah.
But I think in the blockchain world, like, there's this enormous expertise at coming up with cool sounding technical things that then excites people who are already blockchain enthusiasts.
Right.
And I don't know if you remember back to like when you first started looking at blockchain, like the first couple of weeks of it is like, I don't understand what the fuck anybody's talking about. You just have to throw yourself in and like, you're just learning mode. And then you eventually absorb a lot of the language.
Yeah.
It's not that easy to penetrate. And I think then once you're kind of deep in it, you take that aspect for granted. But listen, this market is really good at the marketing side of like figuring out how to scale and get lots of people interested. Like, I didn't know we were going to get 500,000 users in 2 weeks or whatever from our community hub launch a couple weeks ago. It shows how there are some really interesting community growth programs that you can implement. In fact, next week, on the next program for the Web3 game developer live stream, we're going to be bringing in Windwalk and talk to them about their questing platform, which is what we used. So we'll maybe help crack the code for some game developers who are thinking about new ways to grow community that are not just go spend millions of dollars on UA and not even know what you're getting out of it until way late in your process. So we'll address that. But we're just terrible in this market about like naming and like traditional branding and things like that. So branding experts, please come into Web3 and help folks out. Like, they really need help. I'm not going to be the person to solve it. But back to the Web3 gaming is dead question. What I think, like, a lot of people formed their impressions of this market on what these games looked like 3, 4, even 5 years ago.
Right. Yep.
And
which was bad, really, really bad a few years ago.
I mean, there were like shallow website apps that really weren't even games. They were more like staking. They were almost like DeFi applications with some cute graphics around it. Was like the best version of some of these things. So there weren't a lot of good examples out there. To me, that's the thing that's changed. And I think people are still assuming that that's what this market is about. What are you seeing in the games that people are building now that are going to ship like between now and the next couple of years?
I mean, I was blown away just going to the Arbitrum booth yesterday. They had 14 playable games just at their booth. And I remember going to GDC 2 years ago and there was like 2 playable games. It was like alpha version of My Pet Hooligan, I think alpha version of Parallel. Wildcard had an alpha, but they weren't at that GDC in particular. And that was about it. Like, that's pretty much the list. And luckily, those 2 games that I mentioned, Parallel and My Pet Hooligan, both still doing really well, still building, now fully available for people, which is awesome. But man, we were desperate for anything to be able to play. And now one booth having 14 playable titles, that chain probably has 50, maybe 100 with, more, another 100 coming down the pipeline. It's just leaps and bounds ahead of where we've been at. You also mentioned, Mythical, who has a few million players already. I think NFL Rivals might be about to crest 10 million lifetime total players, which is incredible. So we are getting these proofs of concept. I just think there's so much to learn about iterating these economies and the way that different NFTs can be interpreted on a long enough time horizon. What should be tradable? What should be more, wallet soul bound to just show achievements and progress. And there's a lot of flywheels also that I think we haven't hit yet with marketing to wallets and being able to see achievements and transactions and advertising to people specifically based on that stuff that I think a lot of Web 2 companies are going to see and salivate, because we know that entire business models, entire huge companies have gone bankrupt because Apple changes their regulatory policies on advertising and overnight. And there's so many things that we're subject to whenever those players establish and monopolize certain things that I think you would know better than I would. Web3 sort of disrupts. Is that fair to say?
Well, I mean, the heart of Web3 is around open trading economies. I was a huge Magic the Gathering player originally. So like, I think of again, I hate the term Web3. It's a really terrible term. But the first Web3 game was Magic the Gathering, really,
Wow.
which is like, we didn't even have it on computers. So it was trading cards. And what made it a Web3 game is the fact that it was an open trading economy game. And the idea that you have this creativity over building your deck, which we call composability in Web3, and you have the ability to trade those components with other players, then leads you to make a game design based on the fact that people are going to always be trading. So it's sort of like the economic foundation that you have causes emergent properties in the kinds of games that are possible. And it also leaves a lot more to the community as well. So in Magic the Gathering, for example, when I first started playing it, it was a dueling format only, like a 1v1 kind of dueling format. But it was actually the players who invented things like group play or two-headed giant. Like, it wasn't Wizards of the Coast who was like, hey, we have the new, they eventually kind of codified it, but it came from the players. And that's another way of thinking about composability, where you create structure and collectability, and then you turn over to the community the ability to build more around it. So look at what made Magic the Gathering successful. There's a lot in that inherent economic and composability system, which then you can relate to the modern digital era. Now, in digital games, we can do things that Magic the Gathering didn't. Like, when you look at a game like Hearthstone, for example, I love Hearthstone because at the time, a lot of there were lots of tries of making digital CCGs. The main problem with them is that they were kind of the same old paper CCGs, but just put on computer. Hearthstone is like, there's just things we can do through automation and stuff, and the play experience can be more digital native. And
Yogg Saron never could have worked in a paper trading card game. I think that was the one where you would get a spell randomly played for every spell you had played throughout the game. So you would play this one card, and it would play 20 random spells from the entire game all at the same time, and play through the entire thing, which was one of the most entertaining things ever to watch. But imagine trying to go through like every Magic card and randomly rolling a dice to get the one.
Your whole graveyard,
it would have been
exactly like that.
It just would have taken you forever to play like 15 of them and figure out how it all would have resolved. And then each damage was like random targets and stuff like that. And you could also burn cards for dust in that, and then use the dust to forge new cards, which obviously physically would have been impossible as well.
So exactly. So in Web3 gaming, I think there's some really interesting opportunities to build the next generation of collectible games where it's more digital native, but also leans into things like composability of Web3 in interesting ways, meaning you could start to even invent new kinds of game clients, new kinds of tournament structures. I've talked to companies that are creating like open tournament event management systems where it's not the game that makes the tournament system, it's a tournament system that links into the game. So things like that are really hard to do without a structure in place that defines the rules of play and the data interfaces and the way trading happens. So Web3 and blockchain does bring a lot of that composability to the table, which I think will open up these markets in interesting ways. So yeah, I think there's really interesting things there. But the other part of this that I'm really encouraged by in this market category is the talent level of the teams. So we mentioned Kevin Lambert and his work, for example. Like, so he's like 3 decades of experience with Microsoft and things like that. Like, really experienced game developer as part of a team. This is Coin Games. Check out their stuff. Or we mentioned Wildcard Alliance, Paul Bettner.
The Andromeda team has the Elder Scrolls guys and like all kinds of Bethesda experience.
So really, really capable game developers. And actually, just on the live stream I did yesterday for Web3, I had Dennis Dyack on. He's a legendary developer behind stuff like Legacy of Kain. Right.
Sick.
So, and he has all these interesting ideas around how, as you play, you're crafting a history on chain. And it's like, he had, I forget the exact phrase he had, but it's something like play is crafting or crafting is play or something, meaning like the way you use the items over time goes into shaping the story of those items that goes on chain. And he's using things like generative AI to also create like a storytelling layer around it. So sort of like blockchain and Gen AI, but it's a really, it's not just one of these buzzword things, because we've seen that too, right? Like suddenly you go to the website and we've got machine learning, Gen AI, the blockchain game.
Yeah, the Twitter bio, just every buzzword gets inserted in there throughout I can't tell you how many games I know are doing it. Basically nothing with AI. I mean, you know, I'm sure they're using Cursor or something, like help them code a little bit.
And now we vibe coded our game. Yeah, that's our use of AI.
Exactly. Let me ask you, do you think that AI and blockchain intersect meaningfully, or is it just the fact that like every company is going to be using AI and therefore blockchain companies will use it, or is it a deeper connection between those two sort of emerging technologies?
Oh geez, I mean, we could talk for hours just about AI, one, but and maybe we will in a future episode here. But I think agentic AI has an interesting intersection with blockchain in that if you have an AI agent who's carrying out your instructions, the ability to also manipulate and interact with blockchain currencies becomes interesting.
Wayfinder, what the Parallel guys are doing.
Yeah, because now you have the agent, which, you know, kind of carries out your will online, but can actually engage in financial transactions. If you could like give your agent a wallet and be like, go spend some currency to get this other work done, interact with other agents, other AI applications, and then come back and synthesize it into results. I think that's going to be very, very interesting. And blockchain enables that in a lot of interesting ways, similar to what we were just talking about, the composability of games. So composability works in Web3 architectures because there isn't like a centralized financial institution that like defines all the payment gateways and the way everybody pays each other, that slows down the whole ecosystem, that makes it permissioned. Like that's basically why you don't have that for the most part outside of like super huge monoliths like Salesforce, for example. But in AI, like there's going to be a lot of specialized AI agents that are good at doing certain things. And by integrating the value exchange, which is essentially what blockchain currencies represent, the value exchange happens agent to agent, means that it becomes part of the API. Like the software talks to each other to exchange that value and affect purchases and things like that. That's a much more open ecosystem than either requiring the financial institution, but which would also mean that like they basically control everything, because as we've seen in lots of cases, once you control everything, you get to take a massive rent, 30% typically in games, for example.
Yeah, thanks Apple and Google.
Yeah, everybody. So yeah, there's really interesting things around the AI and blockchain intersection, which I think will manifest over the next couple of years for sure.
This is a little bit of a wrapping back to the previous topic. What's the magic card that you still have that you're the most proud of? Is there a Black Lotus somewhere framed on the wall or something?
now you're making me sad. So I'll have to tell you the story of that.
Oh no!
I do have some cool cards still, but the super valuable ones, I sold them all off. So first of all, I played Magic the Gathering way early in its life cycle, like early 90s. Like I was in college.
Third through 10th edition was my heyday, but I'm sure
I played in
way
beta.
After you.
I played in beta.
Oh my god, beta that's insane.
I played in beta in college.
Wow.
And had every card. So I had a Black Lotus, I had every Mox.
Wow.
I had all the crazy things. I had a complete set of Arabian Nights.
Holy.
I think I bought I bought the Arabian Nights, I think, at the card store for like $300, the whole set. I don't know what the market value of the whole set would be today.
Yeah, don't look it up.
Something ridiculous. So anyway, I had a Black Lotus that I probably bought for $12 or something.
Wow.
And then I kind of went, Magic the Gathering is something I've kind of like gone in and out of over the year. Like I'll be super intense for a year and then I'll be like onto something else and then I'll come back. So I kind of put it down after a few years. And then I looked on eBay one day and like Black Lotus was selling for $200. And I'm like, $200? Like,
easy, yes.
Like that's that's a no-brainer. Unload this thing.
Quick 40x. You're like,
exactly. Yeah, whatever it was, like 10x, 15x.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, okay, no-brainer. And of course, now, like, I mean, I'm aware of Black Lotuses that have sold for 6 figures.
Yeah.
I think 50K is actually pretty typical,
So
even
insane,
for. So yeah, I should have held it. I mean, that said, I don't know, 25, 30-year holding period is a pretty long investment.
That is, most people don't hold gold that long.
Yeah. So I don't know. The cooler cards I have now is like the dragon signed by the author, like stuff like that. But it's not really valuable.
Yeah,
it's like, but it's just cool that I still have that.
Absolutely. I saw a cool thing the other day of some people with Pokemon cards that were on the big sheets that they hadn't been cut out yet, and they had it like framed on their walls. Yeah, it's like that'd be a fun one. I have an office that I'm slowly but surely, collecting different things from all these conferences and the games that I love and stuff. Now that I work with so many founders, and creating my own sort of memorabilia treasure chest of stuff that's gonna like commemorate the career and stuff, which I'm looking forward to being able to celebrate for the next couple of decades.
Well, speaking of founders and teams you work with, tell us more about Farcade and what got you excited about that and what you're doing.
Thanks, man. Yeah, so the Farcade is, like I said earlier, trying to be the TikTok of gaming. And what I mean by that is TikTok was a really big paradigm shift in the way that people approached content for a couple of different reasons. I think one is it really enabled people with phones. I mean, this is on a phone right now, right? And I come from videography and photography where you needed that $2,000 camera and another $1,000 lens.
Not any idiot with his iPhone can now live stream like me.
Yeah, exactly. It's incredible. And whenever you enable people to be creative without 10 years of skill and a huge budget, it's amazing what they can do, And we are trying to do that exact same thing, but for game design. We think that people are going to have absolutely incredible ideas, but you have to know how to code. You have to have hundreds of hours to do it. You have to have distribution to get that thing out there. You have to have a budget to support yourself and to pay for software and to have a computer that's good enough to do the things, run unoptimized games, which can be a pain until you get to that point. So we think that by giving people no coding solutions to creating games, they're going to come up with some of the greatest hyper casual hits that we've ever seen in our entire lives. We're also going to essentially give people the power to remix each other's games. So another thing that TikTok did was introduce stitching, where I take your video and I combine it with my video, and now we have a new piece of user-generated content that hits the timeline and is distributed on its own. And so what we're going to do is essentially allow people to create their own games, send it to a friend, and then their friend can iterate on it. So they can say, this is really cool, but what if gravity was 50% less strong so everybody's more bouncy? What if it was faster? What if it was harder? What if everything's on fire? What if everything's upside down? What if it's an ARPG instead of just a regular RPG? What if it's a text-based adventure now? All these things. And we think that ping-ponging back and forth with your friends and redistributing these games and doing little contests of, oh, mine got 10,000 plays, but mine got 50,000. It's going to create this incredible atmosphere where people are able to really create interesting things, but also highly customizable. Like that's one of the fun things about AI is you can create exactly what you want because it's lowering the barrier to the difficulty of creation.
One of the reasons why I really love the whole idea of vibe code, I kind of think of this as like vibe coding with TikTok structure around it. So what's cool about vibe coding is for years in game development, we've sort of had, it's practically a meme within game industry, which is like the idea guy is sort of like a waste of time. You don't need ideas in the game industry because actually building stuff is the hard part. And that's going to remain pretty true, I think, for a while. But the interesting thing here is maybe the idea guy is now going to have his day with vibe coding because you'll have an idea and you're like, hey, let's try that. And you go onto your platform, try it, and maybe it'll get traction and suddenly you'll have like the next, hit game that just a million people love trying.
Absolutely, man. And there's just like TikTok. So me and my brother had 10 million subscribers on YouTube back in 2018. We were actually using Musical.ly, which was the predecessor to TikTok before it got acquired by ByteDance. And whenever TikTok came out, we were like, oh, musically, like whatever, we used it, it wasn't that great, but that was a big mistake, obviously, in hindsight. And sure enough, Charlie D'Amelio was absolutely blowing up. She ended up getting like, I don't know, 50 million subscribers, I think, in 2 years. And she was like a 14-year-old girl making UGC on her phone. And we think that same thing is going to happen with these coding games, because you know who has really innovative ideas is always kids, because they're not bound by all these concepts that we're already latching onto.
No one told them no.
Yeah, exactly.
Work, right?
And nothing's nostalgic. And, you know, I'm not trying to recreate GoldenEye. I'm just thinking of new, interesting ideas, you know? And that combined with, you know, we talked about Wildcard. I think that Wildcard is going to be insanely successful, because I think genre bending is the future. I think we saw
remixing.
Yep,
sure.
Music has had this experience over the last 10 or 20 years where it's really hard to put certain people in certain categories now, because like Bon Iver is like 4 genres of music all in one, and Kendrick Lamar is like jazz and hip hop and sort of pop and funk at the same time.
Sure.
And so I think we're going to see that now with gaming. Whenever you take away all the constraints and you don't need 100 devs to all agree on the path or whatever, it's just a kid that's like, what if we took solitaire, like Balatro? You know, have you played Balatro yet?
I haven't, no.
It's a roguelike with poker. So you're playing these cards and there's all these multiples and there's
poker
different
is
ways
the combat mechanic, basically.
Exactly. And you're basically trying to get a high score, and they give you all these variables. So they took a you know, hundreds and hundreds of years old game and combined it with a brand new mechanic that we have come to love, with like Hades and Slay the Spire and stuff like that, and created a game that is an indie game made by, I think, 6 people. And it almost won Game of the Year against Elder Scroll, or against what's the
Baldur's Gate.
Yeah, Baldur's Gate. Oh my God, the Elden Ring. Elden Ring. Jesus.
Oh, Elden Ring.
So Elden Ring ended up winning this year, but Balatro was a top 5 game with 6 people, just because it was a brand new, interesting approach to old games. And so I think we're going to see a ton of that, and I'm incredibly excited about it.
So I want to talk about other games that you're excited about too, just that you have your eye on, and also we should give a shout out to some of the folks that sponsored WolvesDAO here too, and just give them a chance to have their moment here. But I want to say the reason we do this as a live program is we could do a YouTube video.
Sure.
I wouldn't be as as any good at like scaling a big audience with that, but it would be a way we could do this. What you can do with live is involve the community. So you could be asking questions. So I'm looking at you out there. You could join this program. There's 2 ways you can do it. And how many people do we have in the live audience right now, Oscar? I can't see the numbers.
Right now, we're approaching 200.
Okay. So you've got a couple hundred of you out there. You're probably mostly crypto, Twitter, X folks, just based on the statistics we normally see. So why not post a comment? You've got one of the leaders in Web3 right here in terms of promoting it, Farcade and Wolves Den and WolvesDAO and all that stuff. I have a game industry background that spans kind of all of the above. So please ask your question. And if you're bold enough, you don't mind being on camera, Oscar will send you a link to StreamYard, and we'll bring you on live right now. So you can do that. Yeah.
Let's go. Well, I have a question for you in the meantime, Jon. In that games industry background, what's the game that you're the proudest having worked on in the past?
That I've worked on, that I personally built.
Yeah, or been a part of, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, so the most commercially successful game that I personally worked on was Star Trek Timelines.
Awesome.
Which was like a childhood dream, really.
I bet.
Because I grew up with Star Trek The Next Generation on TV. And I'm sure as a kid, I was making shareware games as a kid. So I was like the circa late, I don't even want to say the year, but I was the equivalent of the Roblox kids making games now, except like on an Atari ST or an Amiga.
Oscar's on it, man. He has the clip up already. Sorry.
Oscar crushing it today on the video runs. But yeah, so I grew up with imagining the holodeck someday and loving Data, the android, and the characters, and I shipped a game called the second game I shipped was a shareware game called Final Frontier. So obviously inspired by Star Trek.
Yeah.
So when I was working on Star Trek Timelines, I kind of woke up every day like, I can't believe I'm working on a Star Trek game.
So cool.
And I took it very seriously that we wanted the whole thing that I wanted to do with Star Trek was, it's hard to do a Star Trek game that's actually true to Gene Roddenberry's vision, because Star Trek isn't really about fighting. Like, it's easy to make a fighting game. Like, I envied anybody who made a Star Wars game, in that, like, if you can do lightsabers right or starships shooting at each other right, you got a pretty solid game right there. Like, you don't have to go pushing any new envelopes. And that's because it's literally in the name, Star Wars, right? Like, just do the wars part and you're good.
Don't overthink it.
Yeah. Well, that said, I also love KOTOR. Great storytelling. Really, really well done. One of my favorite games of all time. So you can also tell a great story in the universe, but like, it's also a fighting game, even in KOTOR. Star Trek is harder because you could do a Starship Battles game, and that's been done a few times fairly well. But Star Trek is really about like this optimistic future vision of the universe where people are going out and exploring, and adventure and ethics and philosophy and like engineering is important, like all that. So it turns it into more of a storytelling game, and we had to come up with like a cool storytelling principle around kind of the idea we came up with was almost think of it as like fantasy football, like collect characters and then assemble them into your dream team. Imagining like if you put Data with Spock, like never really happened in the show, but you could put Data and Spock together and send them on an away team mission, what would they do in the story? And that was kind of the idea that we brought to life in the game. So I'm really proud of like the unique game design, the game mechanic we came up with, and the fact that I got to live that dream. And you can still play Star Trek Timelines today. It's how old is that game now? It's pushing a decade almost. It's been out for a while, so you can play it. I haven't been personally involved in it in like 5 years now because we sold it to Tilting Point, it's a mobile game publisher. But Star Trek Timelines still playable today.
2016.
2016.
All right,
there
it's 9 years
it is.
old. I'm feeling older, and I'm going to join these other people that are like the 30-year vets that join my live stream.
I was talking for a little bit about. I was head of growth at a game studio just for a short stint before I decided to double down in Web3 gaming. And at the time, we were talking about acquiring a license to do a Battlestar Galactica themed game. And I started asking some of my colleagues in the space about using IP and sort of some of the pitfalls that come with that, and the relationships that you have to manage, and making sure that you honor the IP in the way that, you know, obviously the license owner wants you to do that. Any tidbits or anecdotes about
IP games? Yes, I've learned the good, the bad, and the ugly of IP-based games. Yeah, so Star Trek Timelines wasn't the only license I did. The first one is Game of Thrones.
Oh, wow.
Right as the HBO show was blowing up.
Yeah, incredible.
Which I frankly got lucky. I loved the books. Got to work with George R. Martin even before HBO bought it out. And I remember talking to George, and he's like, I don't know if anyone's going to even watch the show. It could just be one of those things that no one really cares about. Of course, blew up, ended up having 25 million viewers per episode.
Holy crap.
And we did really well with that game. We shipped 11 million copies of the game. So that was my first. And then I did Star Trek. We did a Walking Dead game, and we did a game based on Archer, the FX.
Yeah,
series.
Incredible show. So clearly it can't be that bad if you were willing to do 4 different IP deals then.
Yeah. So, well, I have a lot. I mean, I would have to have a full hour plus to talk about IP and all this mentions. But here's some of the takeaways. And by the way, we did a previous live stream. Maybe Oscar, you can find it to share with folks contextually here. But we brought on Alan Dean Foster, who's a legendary science fiction author. And we talked a little bit about IP and the specific game they're building for Midworld there, which is one of his books. IP. So my feeling is IP works well on newer platforms that don't have super entrenched competition yet, because when you have fewer competitors, the fact that you've got a really well-known world to set your game in is a massive competitive advantage in terms of people willing to try it. So when we shipped Game of Thrones earlier than the Star Trek game we were referring to earlier a moment ago, I think we shipped on. We actually shipped on iPad, believe it or not, even before iPhone.
Wow.
We shipped on. I think it was 2014. Sorry, 2014 was the release date of the iPad, and we were featured.
Sick.
And it's Game of Thrones, and the show is like in its heyday at the moment. So super easy choice to click, install, and give it a try. And it was kind of like getting like your venture capital round. Like that was the Series A. Like they featured us on the App Store, but we didn't give up any equity.
Nice.
Apple was nice enough to do that. So over time, as the platform gets more and more popular, a lot of other people have that same idea. We basically had no IP competition. Everything we were competing against was, whatever random game was coming out at the time. So we just automatically stood out. But eventually it starts being like, oh, there's a indistinguishable.
They really do.
You don't care anymore. And it just starts to get really hard to stand out purely from the IP. But then because you're paying royalties for the IP, you're also compressing your margins. So you kind of end up with the worst of both worlds in a late stage market. And we saw that, frankly. So Game of Thrones was like, that gave us our start. Star Trek, super successful. We really started to see like the market get more challenging when we shipped the Walking Dead game. Archer did pretty well because it had such a niche audience. Like people who love Archer really love Archer, and we nailed it in terms of like the content felt like the show. So
great.
But it wasn't Game of Thrones size scale either. It was almost kind of a passion project because we loved Archer. But it got harder and harder to compete and also make the margins work so that you could reinvest it in the studio. So it's hard. For Web3, that may be the opportunity, though. Like I haven't seen IP take off. Like it feels like early mobile still. Like everyone's creating original ideas, which is totally great too. Like that's how we have things like Candy Crush today, or all the games that Supercell has shipped over time. Like that was born out of that environment of original IP creation in the mobile platform. And if you can do a great game and capture attention, you can build really enduring franchises there. But we're still so early in the Web3 market that I think there's some very interesting opportunities to take these licensed worlds and bring it to Web3 as well, because those will be automatic standouts when we do that. But it will wane over time and kind of have those same dynamics play out.
What do you think about the approach that Project O is taking, where they're using CC0 stuff, like licenses that have expired, essentially with Winnie the Pooh, there's Robin Hood and Red, there's the Big Bad Wolf, and so many others, in order to make their intellectual property feel familiar, even though it isn't really an established IP that they themselves have built up?
I think that's an interesting idea because it saves you on the royalty side. We never built this back at Disruptor Beam, my studio, but I was always really free idea. I was really interested in two particular IPs and seeing if we could pull it off ourselves. One was the Lovecraftian universe.
Great one.
And just like go right into it and use all the characters and stuff like that. I think that I haven't actually seen, I've seen people talk about it and seen a couple of demos actually. I haven't seen a game of that category hit yet, but I think it could. And you could build in that universe and probably build a really passionate audience if you did it well and not pay the royalties. So that's a possibility. And I also was really interested in Conan as well. Conan's an interesting one because they've kept the trademark rights alive through a holding company. So you can't call your game Conan, but you can, unless you pay them a license fee. But the world and the universe created by the original author ultimately is built by multiple authors over time, but the original author's content is now public domain as well. So I was interested in that. So yeah, I think there are some opportunities around some of the universes that are exiting their copyright coverage lifetime. Just probably be careful about trademarking type stuff, because some of the rights holders kind of still extract their pound of flesh for their IP management companies through trademark execution and what you call it. But I do think that's
Mickey Mouse isn't. You have to be very aware of like what is and isn't within like the scope of like public domain. Like, Ruby Red Slippers, don't do that. If you're going to use the Wizard of Oz, understand there's a lot of stuff there that you cannot touch because it belongs to someone else. Most That's how Disney managed to hold on to their IP for so long. It's like they tweak.
I will say though that the key thing with IP is that IP helps you market the game, but you still have to build a great game. So you can get people in the door with Game of Thrones or Conan or Lovecraft or whatever it is that you want to do. But if the game then is not exciting to that audience, first of all, the audience showed up because they love the IP. So if it doesn't feel like Game of Thrones in that example, or Star Trek, they're going to reject it pretty fast and move on to something else. In fact, they could even have backlash. They'll be like, this was a terrible version of that IP. So in the example you were just giving around Project O, sure, clever idea, but what they're doing right, I think, is actually looking at what goes into a mass market CCG to make it successful, and not just sort of making it a quick flip. We're using some IP, get people in the door, make a little money, and move on to the next thing. Like, they're actually thinking very deeply about the design and testing it, both with top CCG players to see if they like it, and they're getting feedback. Like, this is like one of the best CCGs I've ever played kind of feedback. And similarly, making sure that it's not just for that top tournament player, it's for the mass market. So they're doing what I think is really important in game development generally, which is have a high velocity. By the way, Beamable customer at Coin Games, so we love all our customers and love that they get to market faster. But
Kevin Lambert.
So yeah, we'll bring Kevin on a future episode as well, and he can give his version, his obviously much more informed version of this, but I'll admire for a second. I think the benefit of moving fast, having fast velocity in game development, is you really maximize the value of your runway to try lots of things. And the most important thing you should be trying continuously through your development life cycle is getting it in front of your target audience and getting feedback and using, and that's the first half, getting the feedback, but also you have to have a development process that can incorporate that feedback into the game. So listening to the audience and continuously iterating and improving. And that's what I saw his team doing really well, which is really listening to the primary market constituencies, like the top CCG players, because that's going to help you market the game. But there's not that many top CCG players in the world. We're talking about like hundreds of worldwide players. So you can't build it just for them. You need the mass market as well. And also making sure, like, I think like Marvel Snap really captured, like, how do you build a mass market version of this kind of game? And I think they are applying some of that thinking in Web3 as well. So yeah, IP, totally great on marketing. I built all those games, though, not just for the marketing advantage. Like, when I told VCs, I'd be like, this is our competitive advantage for cutting the costs of UA for a mobile game, which is really ridiculous. But to build a successful game, we had to capture the essence of what was special about that universe and build game mechanics that brought that to life in a really inventive way and an engaging way with the audience. And if you can do that, you can build a successful game and not squander the opportunity of using IP.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where we've seen the cost for user acquisition go up and up and up and up and up, where it felt like, I don't know, maybe this is incorrect, but in the early 2000s and stuff, it felt like you kind of, you have like PlayStation kind of has a distribution network for you if you're getting published, and you might take, I don't know, 10 or 20% of your budget, but now it's like 50%, sometimes even 60%. I think Honkai Star Rail was like $400 million that they spent on user acquisition for that game, even though they already had Genshin Impact. They just knew that if they kept pouring money into it and they had the monetization locked in, that they would be able to recoup those costs. And so other mobile game developers are looking at that and going like, holy crap, how are we supposed to compete with that? Do you think that that's a problem that Web3 helps solve at all?
Games sort of live off of new distribution channels emerging over time. And a lot of the opportunities that emerge in gaming markets is when you can be early enough to new distribution systems to take advantage of it. Now, Web3 is interesting because I'm not convinced that the distribution systems really exist yet. Like there is things like the questing platforms that we'll talk about with Windwalk next week that can help, but that's kind of to attract like the people who are interested in tokens and the DeFi aspects and like the, you know, all of that stuff. I'm not convinced that that's the great way to get the gamers. Like you guys are doing the work of how you get the gamers and creating like guilds and social structures and like people actually playing the games and presenting the gameplay. Like I think that's interesting, but super scaled out, like get millions of users easily through Web3 front ends. A lot of people are working on that. Hasn't been proven yet, just because also there aren't too many Web3 games outside of, say, Mythical Games has a lot of users, but they get it through mobile distribution. They're really Web 2.5, so to speak, and then it's like mobile first, and then later you discover that there's this trading economy that you can access separately from the mobile install. The cool thing about that, though, is if you're building in this environment now, these platforms will emerge and you'll get the opportunity to be there at the right time to distribute into them. And this has been true of every platform, right? Like, so the Steam of this platform hasn't happened yet. And Steam has sort of opted out at this stage, although they're getting a little bit more friendly towards it. But
Epic giving us some love, giving us some opportunities.
Epic is much more open-minded about it. Tim Sweeney has said he likes the innovation. So like I'm grateful to see them just being a more open environment overall. But yeah, I think that building a mobile game studio today is really, really hard. If you can build a game very efficiently and you have sort of a unique take on something and unique way of building your audience, you can still do it. It's not like completely lost to you, but it is a financial arbitrage game essentially at the incumbent level. If you look at like the top 10 games on the app stores, they maintain that position because they genuinely built great games that built an audience, and the audience just keeps wanting to go back to it. So you now have, in some cases, people who've been playing the same game for years and love it and will return to it. This is what happens with any game. But also they replace churn through a lot of user acquisition spending, and their budget is sort of unlimited relative to like any normal like mobile startup. So it's just super capital intensive. It requires a lot of technology, a lot of data analysis, machine learning, all kinds of stuff that's really complicated to do unless you already have the scale of those guys. We're hoping that over time, like one of the opportunities I saw with Beamable is the tech stack aspect of it. If you could create an open economy around plugins for machine learning and helping with more of the publishing aspects and user acquisition and player analysis, reality is it's no one company can build all of that, but an ecosystem could build all of that. That's why we went with more of an open source model for the Beamable DPIN launch, so that we could encourage community of third-party developers who want to come along and build modules for like a machine learning system that helps you do price optimization, or the best like notification engine to re-engage your players. Like all of these things could be created by the community, and then people kind of pull it off the shelf and assemble their game from the best practices and the best systems available. And that hasn't existed on the back end so far, because back end tech tends to be very siloed. So that's one example of where I think we can help, and where maybe we'll start making those kind of capabilities more accessible to people, even in traditional markets like Web 2. But in Web 3, as these platforms emerge, I think it will surface some really interesting opportunities. And I know, like going back to Mythical Games, for example, I know that a lot of their strategy is very much to take this big audience that they're aggregating with licenses like the NFL and FIFA, and over time turn it into a publishing engine too, where they can invite other games into the platform, use the trading economy so that you start trading between games, again, composability, stuff like that. So these are the platforms of the future that give developers the ability to really crack the code on how they work and then scale up their businesses as a function of that.
it seems like a lot of the bigger players, I know Gunzilla is also doing that as well behind Off the Grid. My last question for you, as I know we're running out of time here, is if for people that are not necessarily founders of games, how can they best get involved with Beamable if they're watching this? What do you recommend?
Go to beamable.network if you're curious about what we're doing. We will do a token launch in a few months, and we're going to be releasing more and more specs on the protocol. So cool thing about Beamable is it's not like one of these purely aspirational projects where token is like the funding event, and then later we'll figure something out. That's given rise to too many rug pulls in this space.
Yeah.
For better or for worse, we took the contrary and opposite of that, which is like to build working technology stack that people are running on first, and then release the DPIN network that it is built around. But you can learn about that on beamable.network and then you can join the community hub, which there was 500,000 members yesterday.
Crazy.
It's probably more than that today. Yeah. So, but that said, every single person who takes part, like, you're super early in this. Like, we literally opened the community hub at ETH Denver 2 weeks ago. So like, come on in. You're not too late. Like, it'll hopefully be millions of people by the time we get to the launch.
Yeah, something tells me it will be. Thanks so much for having me, Jon. I appreciate you, man.
Yeah, appreciate you, Sam. Thanks for taking part in this. Next week, we're going to be back talking to Windwalk at the Web3 Game Developers live stream. That's going to be 9 a.m. Eastern time on Wednesday. So if you want to learn more about how specifically Beamable built this community, like, that's your opportunity to get a lot of alpha about how a game studio or an infra project like us could build really rapid growth communities around that using questing platforms. So I've been involved in things like gamification from way back. I wrote a gamification book years ago. It was actually an anti-gamification book because I thought everybody was doing it in kind of a terrible way, just making leaderboards and badges and then forgetting why people want leaderboard placement. But we'll talk about that next week, and I hope you'll join us. Sam, awesome having you here. Thanks for opening up Wolves Den, by the way, too. This is absolutely beautiful. Look at this background that we've got here.
Thank you so much for supporting us, man. I can't tell you how much it means to me, and the entire community will be eternally grateful. Thank you, Jon.
Awesome. And Oscar, thank you for producing. And you were Oscar on the spot today.
Yes, sir.
With those video links.
He's ready to go, man.
Games. Oscar, say goodbye for this, and we're going to go off the air until Wednesday. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
See you guys next week. Thanks, everybody.